Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben. This is Diego Sanchez. Randy Couture.
Alistair Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio. Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to another episode of Submission Radio. It's the January the 19th. Dennis Gradiff here with Kasper Rosalowski for a delayed episode. A delayed episode cast of Submission Radio. I am partly to blame, and also the scheduling of the fights. As many people know, the fights use... Well, yeah, mainly me. I will take... Hey, look, I'm not going to be like the referees on this card. I will take the responsibility and the blame.
Oh, wow.
UFC Fight Night Dillashaw versus Cruz. I know the claws are out. Dillashaw versus Cruz was a day later, and it so happens that it was on my birthday. Many drinks were had with Kasper, and here we are a day later, or a couple of days later, with Submission Radio. I apologize to all listeners, but I guarantee you we have a very, very special episode for you today.
We do, but you seem to be confusing me with somebody else. No drinks were had on my part. It was a family day for old Dennis. No, I'm just kidding. We had drinks on Friday. It was a fantastic night. Dennis and I hit up the town, and as we were talking about it before, we ended up with a kebab in our hands, and the girlfriend's thoroughly pissed off at us, and that's how we know it was a good night.
That's right. If we don't piss the girlfriends off, then there's something wrong. It's like having a librarian meeting, you know, if they're happy. And also a lot of fist shaking from the girlfriends as well. So, like The Simpsons, where they steal the lemon tree. Shake harder, boy. So a lot of that going on in the Kasper and the Dennis family homes over the weekend.
Yeah, we ate our kebabs, garlic sauce dripping from our mouths. We were looking at the girlfriends shaking their fists. We were like, fantastic. We know it's been a great night. But in all seriousness, we got a great show. We got a big show for you. There's lots to talk about and quite a few people to talk to. Starting the show, the first guest we're going to be having is Jerry Millen. For those of you who don't know who Jerry Millen is, he's a man that MMA fans know quite a bit about. He was the former Pride FC vice president. He's now the Rizin senior vice president. He's the first guy we're going to be chatting to. It's actually a pre-recorded interview, just letting you know. We spoke to Jerry a few days ago. That's just when the schedule worked out perfectly, but we've got the interview for you on this episode. Man, there's a lot that we talked about, of course. Fedor, Rizin, Vanderlei Silva, just putting it out there. So that's a great interview. Mark Hunt is going to be on the show next, after Jerry. He's coming on live, and he's obviously talking about Frank Mir, UFC Fight Night Brisbane, and a whole bunch of other things that we've got planned for him. And then we've got Bas Rutten jumping on the show just to talk about all the latest happenings in MMA. And then, of course, finishing up, we're going to be talking about Cruz versus Dillashaw and all the fun that was.
Yeah, an action-packed episode. And if you guys are listening to this on YouTube or somewhere else, jump on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Submission Radio AU. We've got a new series of Submission Radio's Technique of the Week that comes out every Wednesday here in Australia. The first one is with Anthony Perosh. He's got a few techniques that will be coming out. It's an arm triangle. Quite a basic one, but something that all the white belts want to have a look at. And also Anthony Perosh. I mean, can you get a guy that has more credentials on the ground? Well, there's a lot of great guys on the ground, but we got Anthony Perosh. He's also great. Check it out.
In the UFC's light heavyweight division, there's very few black belts.
Yeah, he's one of the top. And the Hippo. The Hippo, the nickname, it's because of his top control. So hopefully he shares some of those secrets. But check him out. He'll be doing the new series for Technique of the Week. We had Peter Graham before doing some striking, and we're happy to be back to grappling. So check it out. I'm sure you guys will really enjoy it. And also, if you haven't liked us on Facebook, jump on facebook.com right now and like us. It's facebook.com/Submission AUS. If you're into this whole URL world where you like to type things in, otherwise you can just search for us, give us a like. You can actually send us a message through the Facebook page. We love talking to fans. Feel free to do that. Give us your thoughts on the show. And also the Twitter, which is where it all happens, GIF-wise, a lot of jokes, a lot of news. We love to jump on there too. Different content from both platforms, and that's at Submission AUS.
Yeah, for sure. Check all those out. And just quickly, we always sort of mention this, but if you do feel like reviewing us on iTunes, we would really appreciate it. I mean, give how many stars you think. It always helps the show. It always helps iTunes recognize that it is a good show because people are rating it well, and it's good for Google and search engines and all that good stuff. So, you know, we don't ask for any money, but if you do want to support the show, all you have to do is give us a review via iTunes. Also, just mentioning another thing, that next week, the show will be back to the regular schedule. So here in Australia, it's Tuesday. I believe it's like Monday up there in the Americas. But next week, it's back to the usual schedule. So Monday morning, I believe Sunday morning or Sunday night in America, Submission Radio, back to the original timetable.
And there you guys go. Big show. Time to kick it off. We mentioned it's a pre-record. We've got Jerry Millen locked, loaded, and ready to go. And here he is for you guys.
All right, guys. Our next guest is the former vice president of Pride Fighting Championships and the current senior vice president of Rizin Fighting Federation, Jerry Millen. Welcome to Submission Radio. How are you today?
Good. You guys?
Yeah, well, we're good now that you're on the program, Jerry. Now, you're very much known for your work with Pride and now Rizin, as well as M1 Global. But over the last few years, what have you been up to? And were you constantly in the MMA business?
Yeah, basically. I have 3 small children, so, I spend a lot of time with my kids because my family comes, first for me. So I spent a lot of time with the kids. When I left M1 about 3-4 years ago, I always worked on boxing. So I worked with DirecTV and with HBO. I worked with Pacquiao, Mayweather, Canelo, Cotto. I worked on all the big boxing events over the past, actually, 10 years. And, I supplemented my time a little bit of MMA. I worked with Brett Rogers a little bit until he fell off the wagon. Couldn't save him. And then I also worked with a young fighter by the name of Chris Huggy Bear Barnett. I want to write that name down. You're going to hear a lot from that kid. Great fighter, great personality. We've had him in Japan fighting for IGF. And he'll probably come stateside here and do some fighting here in the near future. But, yeah, I've kept my hands in mixed martial arts because that's my first love for sure.
Sure, I can definitely see Chris in Rizin. He'd be a perfect fit. We saw you in the Bellator cage when Fedor's return was officially announced. How was it that you became a part of Rizin? Did Saki Kabara reach out to you because of your Pride days, or did you have to sort of contact them and let them know, hey, I'm still here, I'm interested?
No, ever since, Pride went away, I'm very close with Saki Kabara, and I have the utmost respect for him. I think that he is the best promoter in mixed martial arts, aside from, my close friend Scott Coker, of course. He does a great job too, but great person to work with, and I had a great time with him at Pride, and I've continued my friendship with Saki Kabara-san for the past 8 years since Pride went away, and I would always travel to Tokyo probably 3 or 4 times a year since Pride was gone, and every time I'd go visit him, and, when Pride was purchased, UFC made Saki Kabara-san a 7-year non-compete. So he had to stay out of the business for 7 years. So he stayed out of the business for 7 years. We're here at 8-year mark, and we started Rizin. He told me, he was thinking about it about a year ago. He said, what I think? And I said, now's the perfect time. I think it's a perfect storm. I think UFC is kind of on a downswing. My friend Scott Coker's at Bellator. I think the timing's perfect. And he said, all right, you want to do this? I said, yeah, let's do it. So we did it. And here we are now.
You say you think UFC's on the downswing. Why is that? What makes you say that they're on the downswing?
Maybe downswing is the wrong word. I think it's become almost like, so many shows, it just becomes kind of blasé. 1 week after the other, it's, there's not many fights I even personally look forward to. I think that it's been sterilized in the sense they put him in uniforms. You can interchange the guys, not know who looks like what. There's not much personality unless you are the anointed one, they don't elevate you. Unless they choose you to be that personality like Ronda or Conor, you're not the anointed one. So to me, the pay-per-views have been on a downswing for the past 3 or 4 years. I work in the pay-per-view industry. Ronda's done well, Conor's done well, but besides that, their pay-per-view numbers are on a huge downswing.
Let me ask you, Jerry, we see on Twitter that you're hashtagging everything with hashtag Pride Never Dies. And of course, the look and feel of Rizin is almost identical. What exactly is the goal and aim behind Rizin? Is it meant to be a direct continuation of Pride, or are you trying to do something different?
It's kind of both. Pride had a soul, and it was more than just a promotion, especially for the fighters that fought it. And you can ask any of the guys that ever fought in Pride, and for also the people that work for the company. Pride was a name, but it honestly had a soul. And when it went away, it killed a lot of us. It was like, I felt like we got stabbed in the heart. So Rizin is somewhat of a continuation because it still has that same momentum and that same soul behind it. Rizin is the name, but really you could call it Pride 2.0. And, the direction we want to go in is it's Rizin Fighting Federation. So Saki Kabara has a bigger picture where he wants it to be like the World Cup of football or soccer, in the sense that where all the outside promotions work together and that are willing to work together and bring together some of the best fighters in the world and fight on the Rizin stage, and then we'll develop some characters and some fighters, and we can share them. Because the world is big enough that where some of these promotions, we can work together with Bellator or Gamma or, whichever you jungle fight. You know, if we work together, it's a better product for the fans. And at the end of the day, really, who are we putting these fights on for? For the fans. You know, that's what this is all about. It's about the fans at the end of the day. So that's the big picture, is to try to get the organizations together and have like a World Cup of mixed martial arts.
It's been a long time since Pride was sort of the peak of the MMA world. I'm just wondering, Jerry, how has the game and the market changed in those years? Do you feel like you have to completely change your strategy to sort of make Rizin a success?
I guess it depends on what market you look at. You know, the Japanese market is still the same, you know, and I think the American market is technically, to me, it's still the same, you know, as it was. Rizin is a different product because it is based in Japan, and you know, the 10-minute first round, the soccer kicks, the yellow cards, people miss that. And anybody that knew Pride, or anybody that doesn't know Pride, if you watch Rizin, that 10-minute first round, man, it really shows you, it separates the men from the boys, and it makes a huge difference in the fight. And that's why I think we had so many great matches on the 29th and also on New Year's Eve in Rizin, because the rule set is different. And at the end of the day, people just want to be entertained. There's a million good fighters out there, great fighters, but people want to be entertained. And it's the whole package. It's the presentation, it's the sportsmanship, it's the characters, and then ultimately it's the fight. And the people just want to be entertained, and I think Rizin delivers that.
Well, the first Rizin show was met with a lot of positivity from fans and the media. However, the numbers in both Japan and the States didn't really reflect that. I'm just wondering, Jerry, what's your take on the first event? Was it a success in your opinion?
It was a huge success. The numbers in Japan were great. You know, we more than doubled the number for Fuji TV. Fuji TV is very happy. We more than doubled their numbers from the ratings from what they did last year on New Year's Eve. We had about 4 million people watching Japan, that's a huge number, 4 million people. You got to remember, we were gone for 8 years. So you have to wake that market back up. And, you know, I think it was like 12,300 and then 18,000 the second night. Those are, I mean, listen, we didn't create any new stars to market, in the sense that we had a very short time to put this together. So putting 30,000 people over 2 nights in an arena, 4 million people watching on television in Japan, that's a huge success in my book. Nobody in Japan has been able to do that in 8 years. And in the U.S., you know, the spike numbers were good. You got to look at, we were at 10 o'clock in the morning. You know, a lot of people watch it on the internet. You know, the Spike numbers were good. Spike was happy with the numbers. We were happy with the numbers with Spike. You know, the college football playoffs were on that day. We had a ton of competition. But overall, I think it was a great success.
Yeah, people had some Fedor with their breakfast. I'm just wondering, was there any big lessons you took from the debut event, or anything that surprised you moving forward?
You know, what's not surprised me, but, you know, I think in Japan, fighters just fight harder. I don't know what it is, but I think everybody in Japan came to fight. And I think they realized that when you fight in Japan, it's not the same anywhere else. The fans in Japan are different than anywhere in the world. They don't boo you. You know, they love you whether you win or lose. It's not about winning or losing to them. It's about the samurai spirit and the way of the warrior. You can get your ass kicked 9 times straight. But as long as you keep trying to get better and you have that samurai spirit to get in there and try it again, they love you. So I think fighters know that. And when they come to Japan, they know that if they lose, it doesn't mean they're not going to come back. Or if they lose 2 times, it doesn't mean they're not going to come back. It's about putting on a great show. And, you know, I think the fighters know that. And I think that I was really surprised how great the fights were the first night. And to be honest, I was a little nervous. I'm like, man, how do we top those fights that we had the first night? You know, the production, everything, that was awesome both nights. I mean, I knew that would be not a problem. But it's like, how do you top those great fights we had the first night? So I was like, oh man, was the second night going to be just as good? And it turned out to be just as good.
I mean, the shows were very entertaining, and like you mentioned, the production value was good. One of the biggest criticisms from the second show was King Mo being on after Fedor. I'm just wondering, why did you guys make the decision to put him on after the Fedor fight? Because a lot of Russian channels, after the Fedor fight was done, apparently cut their broadcast. And a lot of people didn't stick around to watch the King Mo fight. Why did you guys decide to put it after the Fedor fight?
You know, we just did. There was no like scientific or mathematical equation behind it. We decided that, you know, this was the finals for the tournament, and we just decided to put that last. And the Russian channels shouldn't have. As far as I know, they didn't cut off. I mean, the illegal streams that were broadcasting illegally may have cut it off, but I know that the networks, as far as I know, like Match TV, who we worked with, did not cut the stream off. But there was no science behind it. We thought the tournament deserved to be, the main event.
Gotcha. One of the things that Pride and its prime and Rizin have in common is that Fedor seems to be very much the centerpiece. I'm just wondering how much of a factor is Fedor to Rizin, and do you think it would have been possible without him?
Yeah, I definitely think it would have been possible without Fedor, but he's a big part of it. Fedor is a very unique fighter, and I've been close to Fedor for about 15 years now, and he's a great person. And right now what Fedor's doing, Fedor knows that he doesn't have a ton of fights left. Fedor is really in tune with helping out those kids that are fighting for him. And I use the word kids with all respect, these young guys, because there's some tough guys coming out of his camp. And he wants to be able to pass the torch and not have any shady characters in between. So Fedor actually brings them to the table, and he wants to open the doors for them. He doesn't take a commission. He doesn't want any of their money. Whatever those guys make, they keep. He doesn't want any middleman in between. He wants to make sure that they get taken care of. And the philosophy with him is, we work very well together, and we're willing to help out his guys. And that's what he wants, because he knows his time is limited. So he wants to be able to enjoy his time, work with an organization that's going to help him out and work with him and help support his young champions that are on their way up. And that's what's important to him. So, Fedor is a great partner.
Well, he had a good return to MMA, obviously a dominant performance. I'm just wondering, what was the process like getting a opponent for Fedor? Because obviously there was a big announcement that was going to come out. Kareem, who's a colleague of ours from Bloody Elbow, mentioned that Randy Couture was on the list of opponents for Fedor. And then we find out that it's Jaideep Singh, who is, obviously credentialed in the combat world, but a lot of negative criticism from fans saying that it wasn't a good matchup, that the matchup wasn't really even competitive. So what were some of the other opponents, and what happened with that announcement?
Well, I'm not going to go through the list of who we talked to, but, I've talked to Randy, and, Randy, it would take Randy a little more time to get ready. Come on. You can just throw it on Randy at the last minute, and never say never. You never know who Fedor will fight next. You never know if Randy Couture would come out of retirement and fight. I think it's a definite possibility. We talked to quite a few guys. Some guys weren't ready. Some guys said they were ready, but they want $5 million. And it's like, come on, man. Our phones were blowing up. And at the end of the day, Jaideep Singh, Sakakibara felt made the most sense. He's of Indian descent, but he's lived in Japan for 3 years. Since he was 3 years old, speaks fluent Japanese, and he is definitely interested in mixed martial arts. And Sakakibara felt that he had the credentials to go up against Fedor. And anything can happen. And it's a fight. I've seen it happen millions of times. And people are always going to complain. No matter who Fedor fought, there would have been a complaint. Make no doubt, because he wasn't in the UFC. All the nut huggers would have complained that he fought this guy's a bum, or he should have fought that guy's a bum. But unless he's in the UFC, everybody's going to complain. And even if he's in the UFC, people are going to complain who he fights. That's the problem. It's like, you really have to step back and say, number one, Fedor makes the decision if he wants to accept this opponent. Fedor accepted Jaideep Singh. Fedor is a grown man that's proven himself time and time again in the sport, and he doesn't have to answer to anyone. He didn't have to come back. He came back for the love of the sport. He was fine with Jaideep Singh as an opponent, and I think everyone should respect that. And, the debate, he's not the greatest of all time. It hurts his legacy. Fedor's legacy is cemented. I've seen 90% of Fedor's fights live. And when he fought in Pride, it was the Joe Louis era of mixed martial arts. And to me, Fedor is the greatest of all time in that era. Now we're in a different era in mixed martial arts. So people got to realize that Fedor is at the end of his career. Fedor is going to choose what's best for Fedor. And, as long as he puts on a great fight and we're not asking somebody to pay $70 for a pay-per-view, I don't think they really have anything to bitch about, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. You're right in that sense, Jerry, that obviously, if Fedor doesn't fight that elite competition, there will be a lot of complaints. And I guess that is the big worry, that if he does stick around, he'll continue to have one-sided fights against fighters not on his level. And obviously you make great points. What do you think about that notion then? How likely is it that Fedor will get a step up in competition for his next fight?
Oh, it's very likely. It's very likely. We're going to have more time to plan this. It takes a lot to put a card together, and Fedor decided, Fedor didn't fully decide to come back 2 years ago or even a year ago. It was about a year ago when we were driving back from a Bellator event from the Mohegan Sun, where he said to me, I'm thinking about fighting again. What do you think? And I was like, whoa. I was like, well, what do you think? And he's like, I think, yeah. Can you help me? I said, yeah, let's do this. So, but I think, yeah, there'll be a step up in competition. Fedor wanted to test out the cedar where he was. I mean, you got to remember, man, he was out of competition for 3 years. That's a long time. He had a suit and tie job with President Putin. And, he just can't take the sport out of him. He just missed the competition more than anything. He missed the competition. And it wasn't about the money. He missed the competition. And he wants to go where people are going to respect him. And him and Saki Gabara have a great relationship. And he chose to go with Rizin, which I think was the smartest choice.
Well, you recently confirmed that Fedor will not be fighting on April 17th at the next Rizin show. I'm just wondering, what kind of timeline are we looking at? When can we expect Fedor to fight again? And is it guaranteed that his next fight will be for Rizin?
Yeah, his next fight will be for Rizin. He, I mean, in the crazy world of mixed martial arts, I can say he's not going to fight in April, but then again, anything can happen. I mean, you know how this crazy fight game goes. I mean, he can come to us and say, look, I want to fight in April. And then he fights in April. But like right now, he's on vacation, taking some time with his family, much needed because he was training his ass off for the past 3 or 4 months. So he's on vacation right now, having a great time, hopefully. And, I mean, we're going to do another show, I think, after April, probably July, then September, October, and then New Year's Eve. And, we have a couple different things cooking. So, it could be July. It could be, the September, October show. It just depends on which way, Fedor wants to go.
I'm curious because we had King Mo on the program last week, and he mentioned how he'd like to fight Fedor next. Obviously, there's a lot of commotion around it. People really want to see that fight. Obviously, he's also signed to Bellator. You mentioned how important the tournament was, how you put him at the end of the event. What happens with King Mo now that he's won that event? Does he fight Fedor next, or what do you guys do with him?
That's something we have to sit down with Scott Coker and figure out what we want to do, because obviously, Mo fights for Bellator, and could it be a Fedor fight? Sure. Why not? Anything. I mean, you can't say no. But, I mean, when you say Mo, I mean, I love Mo, but everybody wants to fight Fedor. That's like everybody and their brother called me when Fedor announced that he was coming back. Because everybody wants to fight Fedor because, if you beat him, you make a name for yourself. And that's the goal, obviously. So, I mean, definitely a King Mo fight could happen. We have to sit down and talk to Scott. Maybe there's another tournament that Mo's in and Fedor's in the same tournament. I mean, who knows? I mean, the best thing about Rizin is our options are open, because in Japan we can have tournaments the way we want to set them down and do them. But no, King Mo definitely could be in the mix. It all depends on just which way the pendulum swings.
And I just want to clarify also, Jerry, what exactly is your current relationship with Fedor? Because we know you guys have been close, like you said, for over 15 years, and you used to manage him. Are you still currently managing him? Are you sort of the one who's most directly... No?
Yeah, no, I've never managed Fedor because I don't want to take money from him. The thing is, I don't need Fedor's money. I'm sufficiently funded myself, so, I don't do this for money. I mean, sure, money's a great byproduct. I've done, very well with Pride, and, Saki Bar has been very generous, but, I really don't do this for the money. I love the sport, and I love a lot of the guys. I think they're great athletes, and I think it's the best sport out there. I've covered the Super Bowl. I've covered the World Series when I used to work for CBS Sports, and when I first went to Dynamite in Japan and saw mixed martial arts presented that way, K1 against Pride, I was just blown away. But no, I'm just a Fedor's friend, and I advise him on things, and I help him see a clearer picture and try to point out the pros and cons of every situation. But at the end of the day, make no mistake, Fedor's his own man, and he makes his own decisions. But we're friends, and I have his best intentions at heart, and I've taken zero from Fedor. I've never made a penny working with Fedor, and I've never asked him for a penny because we're friends. Now, I don't need to take his money, And at this point in his career, Fedor doesn't need a manager. Fedor is Fedor. And if somebody, wanted to cut a business deal with him, he doesn't really need a manager to say if this is good or bad. He needs a lawyer to look at a contract. So, at this point, he doesn't need to give somebody a percentage of his pay to do the deals for him.
Well, you mentioned just before in this interview that everything's up in the air. You also said previously that you have a couple of cool things for Fedor could be involved in, and you said it could go one of two ways, but fans won't be disappointed. I'm just wondering, can you give us a little taste, any kind of light on what one of those cool things could be?
No.
Come on, Jerry, give us something. Give us something.
No,
we're hungry here.
No, then it will be all over the stratosphere, brother. No, I mean, just, believe me, the good thing about Rizin, 4 or 5 shows a year is that I want people to look forward to them. And I feel that what's happened with mixed martial arts, with there being so many shows now, especially, UFC show every week, I don't feel that there's that many shows people look forward to. Like, there's not people going, God, I can't wait for this fight. God, I can't wait for this. You don't really feel that anymore. And that's what I'm hoping Rizin will bring back to that. I'm hoping people will be like, man, I can't wait to see the next Rizin show. It's 3 months away, but man, I can't wait to see the next one. Because I think that's what the sport's missing. I think, a lot of the people I know that used to watch mixed martial arts, the casual fans, they've kind of dissipated away from the sport in the sense that because it's lost a lot of its entertainment value. And I'm hoping Rizin will bring that back to it. And I think Scott Coker's done a great job with Bellator, changing the whole system up from when they got rid of Bjorn. I think he's done a great job over there. And Bellator is a much better product now with Scott at the helm. So I think, the whole MMA universe is starting to shift a little bit. But it's going to take time, we do our own thing. We're definitely going to do our own thing at Rizin.
Sure. I mean, and the whole stratosphere, everybody's still having a lot of fun talking about what could potentially be next for Fedor. This is your chance, Jerry, to get the people excited and get everybody speculating for the next potentially 6 months because of one word you said. Can you give us anything? A single word? A cough, a blink, a Morse code, anything sort of...
No. No, man, I can't because, it all depends on Fedor. It depends on what Fedor wants to do. That's, Fedor's his own man, and it depends on which way he wants to go. Mm-hmm. But, we're working on some really cool things that hopefully will come to fruition, But, no matter what, the good thing is Rizin's free. It's like we're not asking you to pay for it, and you're going to see a lot of kick-ass fights that you're going to see for free. So, I think that alone should entice people to want to watch it.
Another big rumor that people are wondering about, and I'd like you to sort of address this if you can, Jerry, is there any chance that Fedor will move down to light heavyweight near the end of his career at Rizin? Is there any chance that you guys have spoken about that? Do you think there's a possibility that might happen?
I doubt it. People ask him about it all the time, and he says no, he's a heavyweight. So, ultimately that's up to him. I don't think he will, but never say never, because just when I say, it'll never happen, it'll happen. They'll be like, he didn't know what he was talking about. So, I can't speak for Fedor. That's a decision Fedor makes. But, he consistently has asked that question, and, he always says, no, I'm a heavyweight. So I don't think so.
A lot of people expected and hoped that Fedor would fight in the UFC upon his return. This is obviously a while back before everything was made official and set in stone. Do you ever see that happening, Jerry? Or as a Rizin vice president, do you sort of see his foreseeable future with Rizin? And will you sort of make sure that that's the way it sort of continues to stay?
I want whatever's best for Fedor. I work for Rizin, make no mistake, but I want what's best for him. But truly in my heart, I know that the UFC is not what's best for Fedor. Fedor's not the kind of guy that has an ego and he feels like he's got to go chase Verdum or he's got to go chase Henderson or he's got to go chase Bigfoot. That's not like his motive. He's not that kind of guy. It was like, they beat me, I must go revenge myself. That's not his personality. And he just wants to be treated with respect. And over the years, he's been completely disrespected by Dana White until Dana wants him. And then, I was only kidding. But it doesn't work with Fedor. It doesn't work with certain fighters. Fighters that are hungry and need to feed their families, they will kiss Dana's ass. Fedor's not in that position. So, no, I don't ever see him fighting in the UFC. I don't think it's best for him. Really, if you really step back and think about it, and you really think about the reason that Dana White would want Fedor Emelianenko, what would that reason be? Would it be to make him the UFC champion and promote him as this big superstar? Absolutely not. It would be to destroy him and say, look, the last piece of pride that I could never get, I got and I destroyed. Make no mistake, they don't want Fedor as the champion over there. They want to bring Fedor in to get beat. So, that being said, why would you want to go somewhere where, number one, they've never shown you respect, and number two, they're not interested in making you one of the anointed ones? So other than money, what's the motivation to go there?
Well, another big name that's now released from his UFC contract is Wanderlei Silva, and although he's still banned from competing in Nevada, that happened quite recently, Jerry. Now, it almost looks like we're breaking the news to you, unless you already knew about this a long time ago, which I'm sure you did.
No, I'm very good friends with Wanderlei.
Well, if you're very good friends with him, you'll be able to tell us this then, Jerry. Are you trying to pursue him to fight for Rizin? Do you see Wanderlei Silva returning to Japan? Give us something, man. Give us something.
Come on, man. Now think about it. Is that really a question I have to answer? It's Vanderlei
Yeah,
Silva.
sure.
Vanderlei Silva. Of course I would love to see Vanderlei Silva in Japan. He's a warrior. Vanderlei Silva is one of my favorite fighters in the world because Vanderlei Silva brings it. Every fight, win or lose, Vanderlei Silva is a warrior, and he brings it. Either you're going to kick his ass or he's going to kick your ass. And he's a great I love Vanderlei Silva. Very good friend. And I would love to see Vanderlei in Japan. So we'll see.
Do you think that if he does get signed, because obviously, you know, when Vanderlei got released, the first thing that people thought was, wow, now you can make Fedor versus Vanderlei in Rizin. Do you think that's the sort of direction that you'd want to go in?
Sure. I think it'd be a great fight. I mean, we'll see if we can make it materialize, but I think it'd be a huge fight. I think people would love to see that. I'd love to see it, even though I'm close to both of them. I hate to see friends fight, but hey, it's a sport, and friends have to fight because that's just the way the business is.
That's right, entertaining the fans. Now, you mentioned Dana previously, and a lot of fans will know that you yourself and Dana White had a very long-standing feud, one that was rather well documented. I mean, you're laughing about it now, but there's videos of yourself backstage in Pride sending him text messages. This is, of course, many years ago. I'm just wondering, Jerry, is that all forgotten now? Is the hatchet being buried, or is there some kind of rivalry there still?
Well, I didn't get a Christmas present from Uncle Dana this year, so I was expecting a Reebok fight kit or something in the mail, but so I don't, he doesn't even cross my mind, to be honest with you. He's doing his own thing, whatever, God knows, whatever that is, but, no, I mean, it is what it is with him. I don't respect him as a human being, so that, that being said, I think that, no, there's no love lost there whatsoever.
You sort of, when we speak to you about Rizin, it kind of reminds us of Bellator in the sense that the general consensus is we're doing our own thing. But do you ever see Rizin competing with the UFC much like Pride did back in the day and sort of reigniting that rivalry? Or is that just not really the goal for Rizin?
It's not the goal, but people are always going to make comparisons and are always going to say there's a rivalry. To me, there's no rivalry. To me, the UFC is a completely different product. It's a homogenized weekly television show that puts their fighters in uniforms, disrespects their fighters, and, listen, I respect any fighter that steps in that cage. I have nothing to say about any MMA fighter. I don't have anything bad to say about them because they put their ass on the line every day to go out there and grind it out to try to make it to that next level. So I respect that totally. But we're a completely different product, and we let the fighters fight, and we let them bring their personalities. And I think it's just a completely different product than what UFC is doing. So I wouldn't say we're in competition with them. I know they didn't want Saki Guevara to come back because you don't have somebody sign a 7-year non-compete, just to keep them on the bench. Because, when somebody knows what they're doing, they can be dangerous. And Saki Guevara knows the Japanese market, knows how to put on entertaining events. And, they knew what would come, and now it's coming again.
Well, Jerry, look, we've run out of time. Really appreciate your time. We know how busy you are. We have to go, but before we do, one last question. Fedor versus Brock Lesnar in Rizin. Will it ever happen? Give us a wink, a nod, a word. In your mind, anything you think will ever happen?
Hey, it could. If Brock wants to fight, we would definitely entertain it. I know Fedor, we've talked about it. I know Brock is wrapped up in the WWE. I just don't know what I'm sure he still has a contract. I think he still has a contract in place with the UFC. So I don't know. They would never allow that to happen. So if he doesn't have a contract in the UFC, sure, it could happen. The WWE. Stephanie's over there running a great show, and Vince, and I know they were big Pride fans, and Shane McMahon was actually a huge Pride fan, and also like a bigger Fedor fan, and. So, yeah, it could happen. If Brock says he wants to come out, but, I think he's under a UFC contract, but we definitely dig him.
Well, speaking of UFC contract, final question, Alistair Overeem. Right now he's a free agent. Are you guys pursuing Alistair, or is he someone that you want in the company at Rizin?
Sure, yeah. I actually owe Alistair a call. I like Alistair. He's a really good guy. I've known him a long time. And, he could end up there. Who knows? I don't see the UFC letting him leave because, he's kind of hot right now for them, and they definitely need some help in the heavyweight division. So I don't see them allowing him to leave, but, there's going to come a time where he's going to be able to talk to people, and we'll definitely be talking to him.
Well, guys, you can follow Jerry on Twitter at Jerry Millen, and we look forward to seeing what Rizin has in store for 2016. It very much looks like the sky is the limit. Congratulations on the first show, Jerry, and thanks for stopping by and chatting with us.
No problem, guys. Thanks for your time. I really appreciate all your support. Thanks. Have a great day.
This is TJ Dillashaw. Listen to Submission Radio.
Our next guest is a former K1 Grand Prix champion, a UFC title contender, is coming off a first-round knockout of Antonio Bigfoot Silva. He'll be taking on Frank Mir at UFC Brisbane on March 20th. The Super Samoan Mark Hunt. Welcome back to Submission Radio.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, it's a great pleasure to have you back on the show, Mark. We haven't spoken to you since your win at UFC 193. We got to know, what have you been doing with yourself in the last couple of months?
Just a little bit of training, and taking the family on holidays. Just the normal stuff. Just back in camp now for Brisbane. So, yeah, I've been doing a little bit of stuff.
Yeah, well, you got into tremendous shape for your last fight against Bigfoot Silva. Have you managed to stay in shape, or has the good food sort of gotten to you?
Well, I just started training, so it's all good. Of course, you lose a bit of training if you don't train constantly. So I have traveled a few countries just to take the family on the holidays. So, I'll be ready for Brisbane, so no worry about that. I already made a mistake once about cutting weight, like 11 kilos before the fight against in Adelaide. So I wanted to make that mistake again.
Good to hear. You trained at AK Thailand for your last camp with Mike Swick. Will you be training there again for your fight against Frank Mir?
No, I decided to do my camp at the Gold Coast, so I'm in the Gold Coast at the moment doing my camp. The guys arrive probably in the 22nd of this month, so I just started training at a Heartbreak gym, and I might do a bit of zoo while I'm here, and train at JW's gym down here in the coast here. So there's a lot of options to train at, a lot of places to train with, and it's such a beautiful city to train. Got the beach.
You've got the beautiful beach obviously in Queensland. Queensland's known for it, but so is Thailand. I'm just wondering why did you make the decision not to go back to Thailand?
Well, I mean, it's an hour flight from my family, and it's not hours and hours away like Thailand. Plus, it's a Western country, and I don't mind it here. I love it here in Queensland. It's pretty cool. And you've got everything here. It's everything you need, and you have to get an interpreter for shit. So,
yeah, for sure. Plus, you can hit up Movie World and hit the Superman roller coaster. Now, let me ask you, with a time frame, how's that work for you in terms of getting into peak shape? With just 2 months to go before UFC Brisbane, is that enough time for you? And do you think you'll be able to possibly even top yourself and come in better shape for this one?
I'll be coming in really good shape. I've already started camp, and it's good. I got my nutrition going down, everything's going well, so it's going to be, like the same shape, even better than Melbourne. So I'm looking forward to it. It's awesome.
Everybody was talking about how you look like you're in the best shape of your career after your last camp. The crazy thing is that you're making these kinds of improvements at the age of 41. Do you feel like you're giving hope to a lot of people and showing that age really is just a number?
Well, it is just a number. The thing is, I haven't used steroids or drugs or anything to help me getting here. I've been freaking battling with these cheaters for years, so that's the difference about it now. So the thing is, the cheating, the testing's gone differently. I got tested for the first time in Melbourne, but it's harder for these cheaters to get away with it also. Good riddance to you. I'll be trying to use my axe to get rid of you monkeys.
It's interesting that you mention that, because obviously a lot of people are popping for different substances, especially now that the testing has kicked in. I know you've been in the sport for a really long time, but is a part of you surprised that so many people have been testing positively lately, or are you sort of expecting it as soon as you saw that testing was going to take place more frequently?
Well, to be honest, I didn't really, the first time I did talk to the boss about steroids and things, was in Pride, and then they pretty much just laughed at me about it. I was like, well, I didn't really look into it about the cheating of the whole scenario. I didn't know how it worked, and I don't really care about it, so it's not even a big deal. So if they get caught cheating, they're caught cheating, and it doesn't really matter to me. So I don't really if they get caught, that's on them, so it's fine.
Let's talk about your opponent, Frank Mir. He's an interesting guy in the sense that a few years ago when he was on a 4-fight losing streak, people were talking about how he should retire and that he was done in the sport. Now, he seems like he's had quite the career resurgence. It kind of reminds us somewhat of yourself when you first came into MMA and, then your entry into the UFC. A lot of people didn't expect you to end up as a title contender. Do you see any similarities between yourself and Frank in that sense?
Well, yeah, Frank's a great fighter, and he used to be the champion, the UFC champion. He's a nice guy. I like Frank. It's sort of the same procedure as mine. People are always going to say bad things. Naysayers always say when you lose a lot of times, you're shit, you're done, whatever it is. But that's the good thing about being a top-end fighter and a positive fighter. Like a lot of us top-end fighters do, we don't listen to those rubbish talkers and those pieces of crap. It's just it just doesn't. They don't. Those haters don't even phase whatever they say because they're meaningless. They're just guys that talk about shit and just they're not doing stuff. They have to change it. So good on them for doing that, and it does remind me of some similar situation that with mine as well. So I've been down many times, and then it's not like I'm going to fade out here. We're going to say all sorts of shit about you, and they still say shit about you. But you never win, you never please everybody, and that's the main thing. Just stay true to yourself and just keep doing what you're doing. If you've got group dreams and aspirations and goals, you just got to chase them down. That's what life is all about: chasing them down and trying to live a whole life, half our life. So yeah.
Well, Frank's had a few knockout victories recently, something that he's not really being known for. What do you think about Frank Mir's improved striking as of late?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's good. So the thing about it is everyone has to evolve. Their striking's gone better, which is good. So, all the top guys are relevant and good at well-versed at striking and ground. So it's good on them.
Do you think his striking will be any threat to you in this fight?
No, I don't think so. I'm one of the best strikers on the planet. I'm really interested in just organize what I want to do. I know what he's trying to do. He's going to try and pull me down and start playing these jiu-jitsu games. So, but we'll see what happens when it comes down to the party. So.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned the jiu-jitsu party because you've actually gone to the ground with Fabricio Verdum. For people that don't know, Verdum is one of the best jiu-jitsu guys in the world in the heavyweight division. How do you feel about going to the ground with a guy like Frank Mir, who's known for sort of breaking limbs?
Well, I can get on the ground with anybody. Like I said, you've got to be well versed at all areas to be playing around at the top end. You know what I mean? So I should be a black belt already. I've been training in jiu-jitsu for a long time, but I don't mind going to the ground or wherever it wants to be. If the party's going there, then that's where we're going. It's fine.
We mentioned Frank breaking limbs. Obviously you're very confident. You had your arm broken by Sean McCorkle via Americana in your UFC debut. Would you be looking to be extra cautious against Frank on the ground, given that he's made out a career of it, especially because he's, every time he's broken somebody's limb, it's always seemed very unexpected and sort of out of nowhere.
Yeah, I'm not really going to be cautious about anything. If he breaks my arm while we're fighting, then that's it. Like I said, I'm not worried about what he's up to. Mm-hmm. And Sean McCorkle didn't break my arm. He just... I got caught,
Yeah, well, we know the fight...
Long time out of the ring, first time in the octagon, if we fought again like any other rematch, I'll put him to sleep.
Well, we know the fight is going to be a 5-rounder, but the amount of finishes you and Frank have, do you think it'll even last that long?
I don't know how the fight's going to go. It's going to be a great fight. I know his game plan, and I know he knows mine. Yeah. I know he knows I'm going to try and knock his lips off, and I know he's going to try and break my shit up. It's just a matter of who imposes their game first. So that's all it is.
This fight's, it's also a decently quick turnaround from your last fight. How many fights are you looking to have this year, Mark?
Well, I wanted to fight in Korea, like last year, but I wasn't allowed to. I wasn't in great shape. I was ready to go to that freaking thing, but it didn't matter. This is just as quick, so it's good. And I'm looking to fight, so hopefully 2 or 3 times this year now. If I'm not injured, I can fight all the time. But I guess not. Hopefully try and get about 3 or 4 this year. We'll see what happens. It's not my choice in calling who I fight, when I fight. It's UFC's call and Joe Silver and Dana's call. So,
well, a win over Frank puts you on a 2-fight win streak. Just wondering, Mike, how far do you think they'll put you from another title shot? And are you hoping to be fighting for the title before the end of 2016?
Well, I hope so. I asked for Overeem or JDS after for this fight, but I wasn't allowed, and I have to fight Frank Mir just as he's just as accomplished as me. He's a world UFC champion, so. But if I beat Mir, then I can get probably a top 5 guy, and then probably that'll be my bidding for a world title shot, hopefully. So hopefully by the end of the year, maybe, if I win both fights.
It's interesting that you mentioned JDS and Overeem, because that a sort of strange fight in the last fight where Overeem beat JDS. A lot of people were surprised with JDS because he just did not look like the same fighter that fought yourself and was, a dominant champion in the UFC. What did you think of his performance against Overeem? Were you sort of taken back by the fact that he didn't quite perform like people thought he would?
Oh, to be honest, I didn't even actually end up seeing the fight. I just heard the result. I was trying to make the fight, but I think I had to go and take the kids somewhere. But I heard the fight was, was like that, and I was, I don't know, man. You've got to what's going on with JDS or Overeem, how it works. But, I think a lot of people have a fair idea what's going on, but only time will tell.
Speaking of titles, just want to get your opinion. The heavyweight title picture is pretty busy. You've got Verdum facing Kane again, and then the next challenger, is yet to be announced. Overeem, like we said, knocked out JDS in the second round, and then Stipe Miocic beat Arlovski in the first. Just wondering, who do you think deserves the title shot more?
Of course, Stipe should get the title shot more. I mean, he's like close to it. I think he should be next. I don't know. I mean, it's funny how it works because some guys, they weren't even in the top 10. They beat a top 3 guy or 5 guy, and then they boosted right above everyone else. It's funny how it works. It's all about trying to get fighting the top 5 guy and beating them and getting a title shot. So everyone's trying to take the slipstream to the top end and fight for the title because it's the only thing that matters these days is the gold, is the belt.
Well, if Stipe does end up getting the shot like you've mentioned, you faced him in Adelaide and you faced the current champion in Fabricio Verdum. How do you think he'd do? Do you think he has what it takes to beat a Kane or Verdum? And which one do you think would be a better fight for him?
Who? Stipe you're talking about?
Yeah, for Stipe, yeah. For Stipe.
I think he'll do well. I think Stipe will do well against all of them. He's a tough fighter. He beat me. I can't really say much about that. So, it just depends on how he goes with it, So it's like I think you have to just watch and see what happens.
And it'd be interesting as well because if Stipe does become a champion, obviously you had that fight with him, but having a rematch with him and also having the title involved in it, is that something that you'd look for, having a chance to redeem yourself against Stipe, but also possibly fight for that title?
Oh, of course. I won't lose. I don't lose rematches. I never lost a rematch, and it will be the same when I fight Stipe again or the Doom again with any one of them. If I have a rematch with them, they're going to lose. So if it's for the world title against Stipe, if he wins it, well then, or Verdum, they're both going to lose. I'll beat them all.
Mark, we don't want to take too much of your time. We really appreciate the time you're giving us. We know you're a busy guy. Before we let you go, there's obviously you obviously have a lot of fans. It's no surprise to you. And when we told them you were coming on the show, they sent in a lot of fan questions. We haven't done fan questions in a long time, but we figured we'd bring it back with someone like yourself, the people's man. So we got a few that we're going to fire off at you. The first one is from Will KO. His question is, who is the hardest hitter you ever fought?
I don't. Well, to be honest, it's a heavyweight division, and everyone hits kind of hard. I think it's the times that you don't see the punches is the one that actually makes you realize, it's not, and sometimes it's an accumulation of punches. But I think everyone hits really hard. I mean, in the division.
There's no one that sort of stands out above the others. Any particular punch that you remember taking? You thought, wow, that was a big one.
Not really. All of them hit hard. They're heavyweights. I mean. It's the ones you don't see. The ones that when you wake up and think, oh damn, that was a hard punch.
Mm-hmm.
The ones you don't really expect, or like I said, if you underestimate someone, then you get knocked out. That's what happens. So I can't really say. I mean, I got knocked out by a middleweight.
Melvin Manhoef, yeah.
And that's from a guy that's half my size, and that's because I thought he was just a rubbish fighter, and that's what I get for underestimating someone half my size. So I don't think it's I think it's a precision punching and speed. I think that's what makes power. So who knows?
Under the Oak wants to know, who is your favorite Dragon Ball Z character?
Oh, I like Goku. He's one of my favorite. He's my favorite character. He's kind of like me, clumsy and freaking dumb sometimes.
Hey, he's the ultimate gentleman. Now, Taurus, he wants to know, as an avid gamer, Mark, what is your favorite video game?
My favorite video game used to be Counter-Strike, and Condition Zero. Then I played Warhammer. I played a few. Age of Empires is one of my favorite ones, a strategy game. So, yeah, and I've been playing Zombies as well. So Zombies is one of my favorites as well. So yeah, there's a lot of games I like being a gamer. So.
Machida Fan 99 wants to know, and I think I know what you're going to say to this, but he wants to know, what is your favorite meal?
Maybe corned beef and taro is my favorite meal. With some KFC, maybe, who knows?
There we go. That's what we were expecting, the KFC.
That's
yeah.
what you wanted to hear. You want to hear KFC. I should be sponsored by those monkeys.
Exactly. Send some free stuff over KFC. A few questions to go. Fascist Dictator, that's his nickname. He wants to say, hey, Mark, I'm a huge fan. Just wanted to say I flew to Vegas to watch you at UFC 160 and dyed my hair blonde and wore grey Pride FC t-shirt. I'll always be a fan no matter what. No question from Fascist Dictator. Luis Bolanos has a question. He says, is Hassie your #1 fan? And what do you think of him and his pictures? I'm curious about this one as well.
I actually think Hassie's like a really awesome artist. If you see some of his artwork, it's like, you can't really paint like that. He's actually really amazing. I don't know if he swings both ways or he's, but, I don't mind Hassie. He's a nice guy. I just found him kind of hard to talk to, I don't normally invite fans up to my room, but I did when I invited him up. It was hard to talk to him because he couldn't really talk. He was too busy just making funny noises.
Was he just ecstatic that he was, meeting, obviously, yourself?
I don't know what it was. I was trying to talk to him, like, how was your day, Hassie? And he's like, I was like, so what have you been up to? That's the noise he was making. I was like, okay then.
Wow.
I don't mind him. I think he's a nice guy. I like him. I like his artwork. I like what he does, and I think he's really awesome.
Now, next question comes from Barillas. He goes, hey, Mark, thank you for the epic battles you've been into, but do you have any worries in regards of the long-term damage of getting hit in the head too much? Because some fans like me really don't like to watch you getting hit anymore. We feel bad, he says.
To be honest, I don't really care what happens to me in my life. I didn't ever want to be a fighter. I always felt God has gifted me with fighting as my life. And what I'm going to do with my life so I can help others. I don't really care what happens to Mark Hunt in the end. If I worried about it, then I wouldn't be a fighter. Shucks. You got to say to these people, if this person, you're going to live forever? The answer, everyone already knows that. No, you're not going to live forever. You're going to die like everyone else. So to be honest, no, I don't care what happens to me. I'm just going to live a full life as best as I can, enjoy it while I can, and then move on. I don't really care what happens to Mark Hunt. We're all destined to die, that's for sure.
Wow,
if I die doing what I love to do, then that's fine. So be it, I'm happy.
That's why the fans love you, man. Second last question before we get a prediction from you. Kylie Jenner wants to know, what do you think of John Jones coming to your division, and do you think he'd become the heavyweight champion?
Is John Jones coming to heavyweights?
In the future. It's not confirmed, but yeah, apparently he's going to come to heavyweight in the future, possibly maybe 2017.
I think that's awesome. I think that's great news. I think John Jones is a complete competitor. He's been a light heavyweight champion, and of course he's big enough to be a heavyweight. So shucks, I think that's awesome news. Ernesto Hoost came from an 88-kilo fighter to beat all the heavyweights because that's how talented he was. So John Jones could probably do the same thing. I think that's great news. He's just someone else you can fight with.
Now, Mark, let me ask you, obviously, you mentioned you're not big into sort of thinking of what's going to happen in a fight, but if you could come up with one prediction, how do you see this fight with Frank Mir going as we finish up?
I think Frank Mir is going to be trying to take me down, and I'm going to be knocking him out. So I think after he realizes he can't take me down, then he'll end up being knocked out, like the rest of them.
Yeah, and absolutely, Mark. And before we let you go, we just want to also say we've heard you're getting into management. You're going to be managing athletes. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What made you want to go into it, and where do you stand at the moment? How can athletes contact you to be managed by your company?
Well, we're starting a management group. I've had a bad run with managers. I've been ripped off many times with managers, so I know what it's like with the game and how it works. And the reason why I do it is I want to help others make the right choices and decisions for them, because I've already been there. You know, all they got to do is fight and win. And like I said, I tried to start a management group, a union, a long time ago. It just didn't work. It just because I was just getting ripped off so many times. It's just not good. You don't get the right advice. I never got someone. You know, when you look at the AFL or footy teams, they got people that helped them along with different stuff with their taxes and all these sort of things. Where's the fighters? Do they have things like that? They don't. So, I mean, we should have, Fighters Union. We should have